This is the Bob Davis Podcast YouTube channel. I'm in the dunes. I don't need to say where. We're going to talk about dune dreams in this video. You kind of find a place every now and then where you can think and clear your mind and clear the decks for the next chapter. Let's just put it that way. And I'm going to stay in the background and let the dunes visually do the talking. Is this for the nomad community overall, this video? I don't think so. I think this is something that we can all relate to. It doesn't matter whether you're back in the world doing the thing or whether you're on the road. I have some observations to make about life on the road, about the so-called nomad movement, the tendency to make everything amazing when sometimes it isn't, and the tendency to log, pin, write about, blog about, video, podcast about, present, and tell everyone about the experience of where someone goes and what they encounter, the place that makes the root beer floats that are amazing, the hot springs at ... fill in the blank, the top of the mountain at this national park versus that national park. We're going to log and what's the word? Detail every single experience that you can have while traveling. And I am going to talk about how really it's about the experience. Most of the time, I don't remember where I've been. Sometimes I'll be driving through a place and I'll go, hey, this is where that really cool campground was that I went to. I don't even know where I was, because what's going on isn't the place. It's the experience. And I think we are very focused on two things. One, having these incredible experiences so we can tell everyone else on our YouTube channels and on our podcast and on our blog, or just people that we meet, to tell about these wonderful and amazing places that exist, to the extent that every single thing has been cataloged and pinned and mapped and placed in time and space, so that there is nothing unique anymore or amazing or singular. That's how it feels. And I think we have forgotten that whole thing about travel. And I don't care if you're, again, sailing the seas or just going out 2 weeks at a time to visit somebody in Italy, or you're a digital nomad, or whatever your pursuit in life is. I think almost everyone who's an experienced traveler will eventually come to the conclusion that it is about the experience. And sometimes, especially if you travel a lot, you really you have to check your journals, or if that's what you do, or whatever it is that you do, really work the memory to remember where you were when you had this experience. Fill in the blank with the experience. And there are sublime experiences, there are incredible experiences, there are bad experiences, there are mediocre experiences. You wouldn't know the peaks if you did not know the valleys. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So I've often talked about how nomad life is pretty much over. And you might say, what? Why would you say that, especially if you're a nomad? Why would you say that? And how much do you think so-called nomads are responsible for the, quote, decline, unquote, of nomad life? There really isn't a lot of lore associated with this. This isn't like becoming a captain of an airline, where you learn all the systems on the 737 or the A320 or something like that, or the A340 or whatever it is that you're flying, and you have to have your pilot's license, and you have to have a certain number of hours, and you have to have the right education and the right training to be able to do something like that, or being the captain of a ship, or being the captain of a yacht, or even of a fairly large sailboat, requires a certain level of training and education, and there are rules to get a captain's license. Being a nomad isn't like that. You get in a car or a truck or an RV or something, and you go somewhere. You drive on roads. The only license you need is a driver's license. When it comes to lore and all of these things that you're supposedly supposed to know, let's be honest. You get in a car and you drive. And you don't go home. You just drive around. And you figure it out as you go. So a lot has been made out of how to do this and what to do this and what the best vehicle is to use and why and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, we're not the Plains Indians. We're not the 49ers. We're not conquering the West or fighting to prevent the conquering of the West. We're not Bedouins. We're just people that are out living our lives on the road, and we either don't have a home because we don't want to have a home, or we left home and we don't know when we're going back. Sometimes it is a dream. But at some point, I would hope, it's certainly true of me, there's a realization that you're just living in a bus or a car or an RV, and you're just moving around rather than being in one place. You've exchanged, on some level, living in one place with living in lots of places. And I'm okay with that. I have no problem. That, to me, is not a problem. From a distance, this can seem romantic, or it can seem pitiful. And it can be both at any given time. And you go through these sort of ups and downs on a day-to-day basis sometimes, of being really just emotionally deeply affected by the things that you see, or being deeply depressed. And I'm being a little facetious because I don't get depressed, but feeling down because of something that happens and you have to deal with it or whatever. There are people who run around talking about travel hacks and place hacks and all these hacks that you're supposed to know to be able to do this. And they put those hacks on their blogs and their videos and other things that they do, Instagram feeds and Facebook. There's Facebook pages and groups, so we can know all the hacks and all the places and all the things. And what has happened from all of this is that they have taken the self-discovery away. And it's interesting to me because whenever I convene with certain people from certain groups, or when I create content that touches those groups and tag my video or podcast with the places that those groups go to, there is a tendency among many of these folks to let me know that they know more than I do, and that they've been everywhere and they know it all. And my experience is that regular old travelers just don't do that. They will say, hey, I went there once when I was a kid. It was really cool. Or, have you tried this? Or something to that effect. It isn't hey, you didn't mention this. You didn't talk about the back entrance. there is an obsession, especially among people who think of themselves as part of this nomad movement, with free camping and free stuff, getting some stuff from the food shelves, or getting stuff from what is often referred to as the so-called community, which is the belief that we are engaged in some large movement or purpose. And yet, my sense is that this movement, community, purpose is dwindling, at least for the time being. And I think it's because, as a meme, it's tired. I mean, isn't the van life hashtag just closed off? And certainly the van life thing has been the butt of many jokes of people who, quote unquote, consider themselves nomads. But there are groups within the nomad community that consider themselves the arbiter of all that is nomad. And it's a little silly. For one thing, the people who got their PPP loans and their EIDL and their unemployment or were able to work remotely during the pandemic, who got RVs or bought old vans or something to that effect and came out, have gone back to work. They are now back and part of the establishment. Many of the younger people that we saw at that time have gone back to work. They're working, they're raising families. And that is a crucible. That is a crucible of marriage. It is a crucible of family life. It is a crucible of work life that everybody has to go through between 35, 40, and 50, 55 before they feel that they've reached that point in their life where now they can finally retire and have what they want and go, build a log cabin in the woods or travel or whatever it is. But that period between 30 and 50, that is the crucible. And we had a special time 5-6 years ago when people started to cut loose. It was a brief moment, and that was when the Nomadland movie came out. That was when people seriously considered it. And having been in Quartzsite during that period of time, it's when people started to come out to these places as though they were meccas. And I think a lot of them, especially the younger ones, have gone back to work. And then another thing is a lot of people have traded their life savings in or their home back in Chicago Heights in for a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 RV. And they are, instead of dragging their expensive RVs out onto a rocky field someplace, and there are certainly people who do that, but generally speaking, they're going to go someplace where they are going to find people and be part of people with commensurate resources. I can read a map. I go where I want. I don't want to tell you, the viewer, the subscriber, where to go or where I am even. I don't always want to share my plans, and I don't necessarily want you to know my plans. There is a sort of unwritten rule that says that if you have a plan, if you have a dream, if you want to see that dream come true, don't share it. Keep it to yourself. Work toward achieving it quietly. And don't tell people your plans, because the minute that you tell your plan, it becomes somebody else's plan. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with all of the videos and the places and these special places where it's amazing. It's incredible. It's amazing. I want to discover that for myself. I don't want to be told there's a place where you should go. And I don't understand the need that people have to do that. I don't understand the need that people have to bunch up into what is often referred to or labeled as a community. To rush out and share where the community is and what the community does and why the community is amazing. Again, this is the belief that we are engaged in some large movement or purpose, and yet it seems to be dwindling. Sometimes I'm looking for a pristine shore, a mountaintop, a desert, a dune, a place. And generally speaking, there's always somebody else there, whether it's the OHV people or somebody else. But sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm happy to be in a Cracker Barrel parking lot, and I'm reluctant to even say that because one of these days, so many quote-unquote nomads in varying degrees of broken down vehicles are going to show up in the Cracker Barrel parking lots, and they're going to say, we've had enough of this. If every special place is shared, pinned, blogged, videoed, and otherwise documented, then there's nothing special left. If every hack, and I use the term in quotes, is publicized and shared and explained and encouraged and written about in some book, what is it except a killer of an overall experience? In other words, I don't want to know the hack. I want to discover the hack on my own. I don't even call it a hack. I don't like that word. Oh, there's a shortcut that you can take. I guess I'll ask this as a question. Do you think that there are shortcuts to nirvana? Nirvana is earned. Achieving a high level of consciousness is earned. You can't be taught a hack to get to a high level of consciousness. You can't smoke some hash and get to a high level of consciousness. You can get high, but you're not going to get to the highest level of consciousness. You have to earn that. If we have to, and this is for everybody, this isn't just for nomads, but if we have to watch every video, read every book, talk to everyone we know, all before we attempt some great adventure, is it still an adventure? And I guess, a couple videos ago, we were talking about the pioneers, the 49ers going through Death Valley. And you could use the pioneer experience as a template and say, they went as a group. Well, they did go as a group because it was safer and it was better to take a number of people in a wagon train than it was to go by yourself. But a number of people did go by themselves. They walked by themselves. Sometimes they broke away from the groups to walk by themselves because they felt that was safer. They discovered their own path. Is being a nomad in today's parlance so dangerous and scary that we have to basically get a captain's license? Why not become an actual captain and get a boat and sail? It's a van. It's an old ambulance. It's an RV. It's a minivan. It's not a 36-foot Irwin or, a steel-hulled excursion yacht that requires a high level of understanding of the systems and of the seas to be able to run it. So when I talk about a place or an experience, the real question is what does one seek when they decide to become someone who leaves their home and hearth and family and stuff and sets out across the great wasteland to find something? What are you seeking? What am I seeking? What does one seek? And that's really what it's all about. So when I talk about solitude and place and concept, I get from people, I love that one podcast you did where you talked about just wandering around, or I went to that place when I was a kid, or something to that effect. When I decided to do this full-time thing, I'd already been doing it as a part-time thing for 5 or 6 years. And throughout that entire time, I did not watch videos. I did not join the van life, #vanlife thing. I didn't watch movies or read any books about how to do it. I just decided that I was going to do it. And I've often talked about the reason for it was, I'll just do the short version. So I grew up in a town, and by the time I was 17, 18 years old, I hated the town. This is not unusual, but I grew up in a place, and I swore I will never come back here. I will never move back here. I have gone back home many times, and it's like a museum, until things change and it's not like the same anymore. But I said I will never live in this place again. Years later, I found myself in a place that one night I was out for a walk, and I had the sudden realization that I was living in a town that was basically the same town that I grew up in, that I swore I would never move back to. And I didn't move back to that town. I moved to another town just like it. And that was the beginning of me saying, what else is there for me? How do I get out of here? And I hit upon this idea that I was going to take this ambulance and go out and be part of the world and just, not be in a single place. And I haven't regretted it for a day, and I don't regret it for a day, but I also don't have any illusions about what it is. One of the things people often say is you should get one of those maps where you should put a map up on your website so people can see where you've been. Why? Why would I do that? You should get one of those maps where you have the stickers from the different U.S. states, and it's a map of North America, and you put a sticker on for every state you've been to so people can see where you've been. Why? I don't know where I've been half the time. I know I've been in the lower 48 states, all of them several times. But I don't have any idea where I've been. Sometimes, as I have often said, something will jog my memory on a trip, or I'll actually cross my path and go, oh yeah, that place is 5 miles down that road. So when you consider all of the documentation of the hippie holes and Slabcity and all these places traveling across the country to go to these storied places, what you're left with is a well-trodden path and a story that is heard around every campfire more than once. Everyone has heard about this place or that place, and they probably heard about it more than they care to talk about. Everyone has tromped to the palm trees at Kofa or the ghost towns out in the desert in West Texas, and to put it on their YouTube channel with pins in it and everything else. The point here is, and I don't care if you're talking about world travel, I don't care if you're talking about Mali or Indonesia or Nebraska. The point here is everybody seems to be looking for that serene 1950s or 1930s place like it was back in the day. Remember, is there a place along the Pacific Coast Highway where it was like it was in the 50s? No, there is not. These places have all been ruined by the quote-unquote nomad movement, broadcast to the world in some way, shape, or form, or turned into a tourist trap. And of course, tourist traps do have their charms, and some tourist traps are great, like the Jersey Shore. Every blogger and every freelance writer has been to Slabcity or Quartzsite. Slabcity is a disaster. Quartzsite is developing into a disaster, rebuilding Atlantis as a con, and then every other con along the way. What might have been somewhere in the halcyon past isn't there anymore. It's gone. And as I said, what's left is a well-trodden path and a story that everyone has heard many, 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 many times. And they say, well, what about people that are just getting started? What about the places that they want to go? Let them find it. Let them find it. Let's save something for them to discover. That's what it's all about. Because it isn't about place. It's about the experience of discovery. So I talk about a lot when I first started. I wasn't seeking fellow travelers or help or advice on how to be part of a movement. What made it a movement was a movie and a YouTube channel that people profited from. And I have no problem with people profiting from their creativity, but what made Nomadlife a movement were a few key people that made videos about it and told people how to do it, and it seemed like a thing. And for some, it is a thing. But mostly, it's an individual thing. It's an individual journey. And now, I've said some things, and I want to make it clear that when I'm not denigrating community or friendship. I've made great friends on the road, and I have participated in the community, quote unquote, or created a community of campers. Let's say that's really what people are talking about. And I'm not saying I don't need human beings or human contact. I'm not antisocial. I have friends. I see friends. I have family. I see family. I move around the country. In various ways. I'm changing the way I move around the country in various ways. I'm trying new things. And I'm not against people. I'm not trying to put down people that I've met along the way. That's not the intention here. The intention, whether you're a digital nomad and you live, you don't have a home and you live in Indonesia at a hotel 3 months and then you move over to Japan or whatever it is that you do, what I'm talking about is a sad thing that everything in this country, every little part, every little tiny space that was in any way special at one time, everybody knows about now. So it isn't special anymore. So when you go there, you're like, oh, I read about this or I saw this place or whatever. So the overall effect is that we have, through the use of modern technology and communications, in a short period of time, we've literally cataloged everything. You could ask AI to do a travel log of the entire nation, and every single one of the places that AI would come up with would be based on data that is already out there, that somebody's done video on or written blogs about or something to that effect. So that there's left nothing to discover. There is left no adventure. So what they've done is they've brought the nightmare to the dream. We left home. We left structured society to find a freedom, and a freedom of movement and a freedom of thought. And we have created that very thing. And now it's something that you have to go here, and you have to see this person, and you have to have this experience, rather than say, find your path and follow it. We are all on a different path. And it's okay to be on a different path. It's okay for everyone to be on different paths. Why do our paths need to crisscross? Why do we need to bunch up and be part of a caravan? Why do we need a leader? Why do we have to have a movement? Why do we have to create a mythical idea of a movement? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question. It's probably a natural human thing to bunch up because of fear, let's say. Insecurities. What happens if my truck breaks down? Well, you call a tow truck. That's what you do. Or you hopefully get it into a town. How do I know if they're not going to rip me off? Well, you don't. They're going to fix your truck, and they're going to charge you what they're going to charge you. You have to rely on your own goodwill and sense of vibe and karma, to hopefully not get ripped off. It's just part of the way it is. It's part of life, these things. And it doesn't matter where you are. So when I get out in the dunes and I get away from everything, it gives me an opportunity to just think. And think about how I want to change what I do. I also want to say that I think we are living in a delirium. I think that if you look up the term delirium, it's really a bad word. It's a terrifying place to be. And so when I say delirium, do I mean it in the clinical sense? Maybe. The clinical sense meaning that the person in the delirium is terrified because they don't know what's real and what isn't real, what's right and what isn't right, and what is true and what isn't true. And I think that the whole country is living in a delirium. And that is not a political statement. It's a statement based on all of this information that we are constantly inviting into our lives through the devices that we all use. And we're filling our heads with mostly noise and nonsense. And the overall effect is nobody knows. Nobody knows what's true, but everyone wants to talk. Everybody wants to tell you their truth. Everybody wants to talk. There is not a moment that goes by that people aren't trying to tell you what you should do. And you should think. Because we're so chock full of nonsense and noise that we can't help but talk. And there are people who have been trained in how to be a nomad in such a way that they will impinge themselves on a group of people to the extent that they want to make friends because they need friends. They never ask, do you want to accept me as a friend? They're not going to take time to make friends. Friendships have to be earned. You don't become friends in 35 seconds because somebody parked their truck next to yours and impinged themselves on you, your campfire, and other people. And they're too nice to say, you can leave now. We didn't ask you to be part of this. That's something that you encounter a lot. And they are chock full of stuff to share because they've filled their head with nonsense. So you might say, well, where did this come from? To me as a narrator, where did this come from? And the answer is just recently, encountering people who, for lack of a better term, who have been trained in a certain approach to quote unquote nomad life. And part of that training is a belief that we're all brothers and sisters, and we're all part of the same community. So when I find you, I can impose myself on you, impinge on your environment because we're all the same. And I don't believe that. First of all. Second of all, to me, it's the height of rudeness and lack of manners and boundaries that certain people would just bust into your camp and start talking to you and sort of try to be everyone's friend all at once. I don't understand. My experience has been when someone does that, it's there's an ulterior motive or there's something wrong with them. They're out of pattern. They lack boundaries and they lack manners. And you'll get that in these LTVAs. And that kind of provoked me into thinking and sort of ruminating on this question of, is there anything that hasn't been documented? Is there anything that somebody hasn't done a video on? Is there anything that has to do with this quote-unquote nomad experience that at least somebody hasn't attempted to quote-unquote document? Well, aren't you doing the same thing? I don't think so. I'm talking about my experiences, and I'm not talking about or telling you quote unquote facts. It's my opinion about something, but mostly these videos are about my internal experiences in traveling. And I don't have to be traveling I could be traveling on the sea. I could be traveling, in some other form to talk about the experience I have in, let's say, Indonesia or Europe or Italy. Well, Italy is in Europe, but, France or whatever. I don't have to be in the Southwest in the dunes. This is what I'm doing right now. I mean, it's the cheapest thing to do. It isn't, we don't have a fortune to throw into, airline tickets and things like that. So this is what you do. Even the world travel stuff is over-documented. And one struggles to find an experience that isn't full of people trying to have that experience. So, we refer to them as tourists, but I don't like that term because what does that mean? So I guess what I'm talking about is why do we do this? So again, I said earlier, we're all on a different path. We're all on the same path. We're all on different paths. Every person has a different purpose and a different path in life. I would rather be on my path than on someone else's path. Every person has a reason for doing this. What is it? What's the reason that one has for taking this rather extreme step of selling everything you own, burning it or giving it away and driving away from your empty house that you've sold or that you've exited your rental property, whatever it is. Why does one do this? We all have a reason, and I don't think that reason is always on the surface. I think it takes time. I've learned that I have to do this as an exercise in solitude, as an exercise in solitude, to process things in my life, and I've gotten myself from one place to another in that way, and so my travel approach is changing, and I'll talk about that in future videos, because I think that people need to hear that there isn't a one way to do this. There isn't a one place to see. There isn't a one path to follow. There isn't something that you have to conform to in van life or in RV life or in no quote unquote nomad life. These are constructs for social media. We don't have to go on social media and say, "Hey guys, I'm coming to Nevada. Is anybody out there?" Is that necessary? And I think that's been urged and pushed and sold too much. And so then there's a whole bunch of people who believe that doing this is all about finding free stuff, free places, pulling into somebody's field in the middle of the night, getting onto these websites to find out where you can stay, and on and on and on, to the point where there's no self-discovery. And that's why I rail against that. I don't want to know. Please don't tell me the hacks. I don't want to know the hacks. I want to discover them on my own. All of this is really an individual thing, as it should be. Some people come out to the dunes to ride their dune buggies around. And some people come to the dunes just to think, or just to sit and observe and to enjoy, because it's something that they haven't seen before, let's say. There's a lot to see and experience in the world. Certainly there's a lot to see and experience in North America, in the United States, and in Canada, and if you want to go to Mexico, or up to Alaska. I personally couldn't go back to life the old way. I am very grateful that I get to experience life in the desert and to see a bird float in the air without having to flap its wings because of the wind and set itself down to grab a kernel of something to eat, or to just hear the wind, to see the launch of a rocket from a distance out on the coast in California, a beautiful sight, or to see beautiful sunsets. And I don't understand the idea that we're going to create this thing and people have to join. They're going to be they're going to go someplace where the really cool people are. The girls with the tattoos and the dreads and the sundresses and the great hash and the weed and the drum circle, because those are the really cool people, the cool kids. Are they? Is that what you're seeking? Or seeking the old hippies that used to be part of the, movement, who are still beautiful souls out there? And then proselytize that. Do they exist? I'm sure they do. And God love them. And if you do find that place, if you do find those people, for God's sake, don't tell anyone. So thanks again for watching the Bob Davis Podcast YouTube channel. The channel's growing. Thank you for the views and the likes and to some extent the comments. And thank you for the support as well on the podcast, the audio versions of the podcast, clicking through and finding the podcast to listen to, and listening to the podcast on YouTube as well. Dune Dreams.